Welcome to the Project Asia Bundaberg podcast, brought to you by Bundaberg Tourism. I'm Craig Shim from Alphacrane Intercultural Specialists. In this episode, we return to our most popular podcast segment called What's Going On, where you get to ask questions about challenging situations regarding your Asian guests. Before we listen to today's question, if you have something you'd like answered on this podcast, please contact myself or the team at Bundaberg Tourism, as we're always looking for juicy topics to answer and share with our Bundaberg Tourism operators. After all, we don't know what we don't know, and that's what I'm here for, to help you better understand the mindset of the Asian visitor from a cultural perspective, so that your business can benefit from this growing market. So, today's question is by Brett Lakey from the Lady Musgrave Experience.
Yeah, hi, I'm Brett from Lady Musgrave Experience, based out of Bundaberg, and we obviously conduct daily reef tours out to the Great Barrier Reef, out to Lady Musgrave Island. And we have a large international and domestic visitation from overseas, from our Chinese groups, or Asian countries, and also a lot through our European and our English-speaking countries as well. Craig, I've noticed that when the Chinese will get in, a lot will just get in the water. Some won't even snorkel. They just want to get in the water and get their photos taken. It's like a tick the bucket list. They've snorkeled on the Great Barrier Reef. You know, it's quite funny. Some will just happy to hang on to the life buoy with our guides. Won't even stick their heads in the water. But as long as they've got in the water and get photos, they're happy. What's going on?
In response to Brett's question, there are two things that I'd like to mention today. The first one is the observation that you may have made, which is that Asian visitors tend to be obsessed with taking selfies and photos. The second thing that I'd like to mention is personal safety. But let's start off with the Asian trend for taking a lot of photos. As you've probably observed, Asian visitors tend to be very digitally savvy and very social media savvy. They will go to incredible lengths to capture the perfect photo so that they can share that on social media. This is culturally influenced. If you think about Australian millennials, they are also very keen on taking lots of photos, selfies, and sharing on social media. But if you compare that to your Asian visitors, they take that interest to a completely different level. The cultural explanation for this lies in one of the cultural dimensions that I use a lot, which is a spectrum that describes a group of cultures at one end of the spectrum as being collectivist or group orientated, and at the other end of the spectrum are cultures that tend to be individualistic, such as Australian cultures. Now, at that first end of the spectrum, the collectivist or group orientated cultures, such as Asian cultures, they will tend to take lots of photos for the purpose of, number one, sharing them with their family and their friends, and number two, they want to take those photos to represent the group achievement. In other words, if they've just gotten into the water and they can't necessarily swim themselves, they see this as an achievement, not so much for themselves as a personal achievement, but as an achievement on behalf of their group. So that's a slightly different motivator from our Australian guests, who also will tend to share with their family and friends, but it is really from that motivation of showing self-achievement. The other part of the observation that I mentioned earlier, which is about Asian visitors going to extreme lengths to capture the perfect image, it's important here to think about what is the perfect image. So from an Asian perspective, and particularly those Asian visitors that we are targeting to come and visit us in Bundaberg, what they are looking for are spectacular, iconic Australian scenery, such as the Great Barrier Reef, our blue skies, and our incredibly interesting, sometimes strange wildlife. But the other part that they're looking for are those images or those special moments that show them pushing their comfort zone. So, for example, getting under the skin of local Australian culture while they are here on holidays, or specifically getting into the water when they are on the Great Barrier Reef, even if they don't know how to swim themselves. So, taking all of this into account, there are 3 tips that I would like to share with you. The first one is for you to offer recommendations or offer tips to your Asian guests on where are the best photo opportunities in your business. If you're a land-based business, you might say, look, the perfect angle to capture the sunset is if you stand here and you point over there. So offering tips or offering recommendations to help them take great photos is my first tip. The second tip is for you to place strategically placed product branding in those locations where your guests are likely to take photos. So for example, you might want to put in the name of your business, or probably more relevant to them, maybe the name of the location. So for example, Bundaberg, or it could be the Great Barrier Reef. And the third one is to have important messaging, which is easy for the photo taker to capture while they are at that position, because they can then refer to that later and they can add that into their description of their social media posts. So for example, if you believe that you are the best reef trip in the world, then write that down somewhere and have it in a location that is easily noticed by the photographer. It could even be a QR code, which then links back through to your website, Instagram, or Facebook page that has some very basic but important messaging that you think that an Asian visitor may want to share when they are posting those spectacular images of your business, or more to the point, of the photos that they can take where your business is located. That's the first bit that I wanted to talk about, obsession with taking photos. The second part that I wanted to refer to was about personal safety. What you may have observed is that it is common for Asian visitors not to be strong swimmers, and quite often many Asian visitors can't swim. This is purely because of the context where they're from. If they're from a big city and they're from a cold climate, well, that may be a reason why they have never needed to learn to swim. Whatever the case is, they may be unfamiliar with the safety considerations that may appear to be common sense to your other visitors, particularly your domestic visitors. So what your Asian visitors might do is, number one, they could naively overestimate their swimming ability, or number two, they could completely underestimate the safety risks that are involved. This obviously has big implications for you. You have a duty of care to inform your Asian visitors of, number one, the risks and how to stay safe. I'm sure for most of you this is common sense, but there are some problems that come along with this. Problem number one, when you're dealing with your Asian visitor, is if there are language barriers, they may not understand what you are telling them. So my tip here is to really emphasize those important safety points and to be quite direct in your language. In other words, avoid phrases like, it may be a good idea to do such and such, and instead be very direct with the comments like, it is important that you listen to this message. You must do whatever it is that you want them to do. So that's one of the problems in relation to explaining some safety tips to your guests. The other problem doesn't really have anything to do with language barriers, but it's more about the fact that they may or may not pay attention to your important rules. Now, this comes back to that cultural dimension before that I mentioned, and Asian visitors are generally speaking, from a collectivist or group-orientated background, and this means that they will tend to place a high value on taking care of others within their inner group. In other words, their family members and their close friends. Likewise, they are expecting that you, as the leader of the overall group, will take care of them. So what they are looking for is very explicit directions from you in terms of which of the many rules are important to them. So for example, if you have a rule that you need to really emphasize, such as do not swim more than 2 meters from the boat, then that is something that they really expect you to emphasize to them. If not, they will put that rule in the same category as, let's say, 50 other rules that they have just noticed when it comes to being on the water or being at your location, and they wouldn't necessarily pay attention to it. So that brings us to the end of this segment, What's Going On? I hope you found that useful no matter what type of tourism business you own. If you have a challenging question you'd like answered, simply make a short voice recording and send it to me on my mobile phone or send it as an email attachment. My number is 0481 387 625 and my email is craig@alphacrane.com.au. Also, if you have any personal insights, questions, or perhaps suggestions for future podcasts, do share them with us. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Project Asia is a 5-year program to develop Asian cultural capabilities of Bundaberg tourism operators. Project Asia is commissioned by Bundaberg Tourism. This podcast is produced by Craig Shim from Alphacrane Intercultural Specialists. Thanks for listening.